All right, hello. I'm going to display my design for the SplitSmart software. The basic idea that the customer wanted for this software is that they asked for us to develop a software called SplitSmart for sharing expenses between individuals or groups of people, such as friends, roommates, family members, or coworkers. And they gave us a bunch of specifications in which I thought out and added use cases and created class diagrams for all of which to fit their very specific specifications. So if we move on next here to the class diagram, you can see at the top here we have three main user interfaces. The home page is kind of where you start once you are logged in, but before that you'll usually start at the account management GUI. And from there, it will allow you to either log in or create an account if you don't have one. Once you're logged in, you can either go to the group management GUI or the expense GUI from the home page. So what the group management does is this is how you organize and create groups of people that will have common shared expenses that they will be sharing, and there will be lots of documentation that will be included for the group itself. And now the expense GUI is where you can create an expense, you can manage an expense. For example, if a user or the expense manager wanted to create an expense, they could create that and they would set a bunch of these data values right here for the expense, which would then be shared with the group that that expense is part of. They can also go back and change the details of that expense. Likewise, if you're in account management, you can change the details of your account. And in group, you can change who's in your group, what your group does, and all of the above, all of the below features actually. And I'll show you those more in depth once I show you the use cases. Go to use cases real quick. So we'll start with the account management use case. I broke it down into two, the account management and the group and expense management. So if we go to create an account, this is how you would create an account. From the homepage, you click, or from the account management user interface, you would click create new account. You would create a username and it would validate to make sure that username is unique along with the email. And then you would create a password and create an account. That's if you didn't have an account. If you wanted to view an account info from the homepage, you can go to your account management and view the account info. And there's a short visual report that initially pulls up with with all of the most recent expenses up to 30 days. And it gives options to update the account or view the balance payments and run even more reports. For modify account, that's if you wanted to change anything, any data that had to do with your account, you can update your account information from this user interface and change your email or add an email or update your username, or it also would give you an option to reset your password. If you wanted to go to check your balance, you click a simple button to check your balance, and it gives you the total balance that's due, and it can be broken down by different groups and different expenses, as we saw over here. You're part of different groups and you're part of different expenses, and you can break down your balance by that. You can also go to your payment history, so that just views all the balances that you have paid off and are no longer needed to be paid. You can view all those previous payments simply on a page, and like the next one says, you can run a report. So run a report is really important because you can get a bunch of different options. You can also export it. So once you click that, it'll give you options to run a balance report, a payment report, or an activity report. And from there, you can select the date range, how it's sorted, and specific groups if you wanted. It's very customized for the user. And then you're able to export that to a PDF or a spreadsheet. The last one is an option to change notification settings. Anytime a group creates an expense or an expense is created individually, you'll get it notified if you are one of the invited users. And you can change when you're notified, who can notify you, and what types of notifications you're going to get. All right, moving on to the group and expense management. This is more of this right half of the class diagram. So a regular user, we have 3 users here, but one user can be all of these in different circumstances. So the generic user, any user can create a group, and from there you create a group, you fill in the necessary information like the members, the managers, the name, the visibility, the description, as we see in the class diagram here. And you also have the option to invite members. Click that button and it gives you a list of all the members you can invite, and you can type in usernames and emails and such. And then you can browse users and select the users that you want, and then publish your group. Another regular user, if they want to join a group that already is created, they can view all the groups, and they can enter the group name or the creator of the group's name, and browse the groups that fit those specifications and click request to join, and that will later be approved by the group manager right here. So this group manager is the leader of the group and kind of does all the operations. So view approve expense request is when one regular group member, not a manager, sends a request for an expense to be created, and the group manager will click to view that expense and view all the expenses that users have requested. Once that user or once the group manager receives that request, they can approve it and allow or reject it, which would either allow that expense to be created for the group, or it would allow the expense to be removed or sent back to them. Another thing the group manager can do is manage group members, and they can view all the users and their membership statuses and change the status of members, whether they're a member or a manager, if desired, and update all the options with managing the users. To modify an expense is something they can do as well. If there's an expense that's already been created and they need to update something, such as the date, the amount, the description, things like that, they can modify expense and allow the users to change the details if it was not paid yet. If it was paid, you can't change the amount of the expense since people have already paid to it. So that's just a side note, but you can update the description, how it's shared, the receipt image, and like I said, amount only if nothing is paid yet, and then you can click update. Invite users is something you can do after you created the group. You realize you didn't invite the users you needed to, or you didn't invite any users at all, and you wanted to do that later. You can click invite users, and similar to how you would create the group, you would scroll through, enter usernames or emails, and invite that user if desired. Create an expense is something that a group manager can do. Rather than approving the ones that the members request, they can create their own. And so it allows them to enter all the details of creating an expense, such as amount, description, shared manner, receipt image, and give the option to invite specific users to that expense. And once you're done, you can create that expense. But later on, we'll see that the regular group members will have to accept that, so no mistakes are made. So pay expense, group manager and group member can do. That's if they're included in an expense. All they have to do is choose a payment option, either SplitSmart in the app or an external payment that would be approved by the expense creator. If you don't have an option to create it in the app, you can pay the group member outside of the app, whether it's in cash or any other sort of currency exchange, and the group manager can mark that as paid since he received the amount. And that also will validate and approve the payment if you choose to do it via SplitSmart, and that would be after the card information is entered for charging the account. Group members can also leave a group. They would have to first verify that all their expenses are paid so that they're not just leaving without paying the expenses that were assigned to them or they were included in. And that would notify the group managers that the user has left the group if all of the expenses were paid and they were able to. They're also able to manage their membership, and it'll give the user an option, the regular group member, to request a change in their status. So that would send a request to the group manager, and they would be able to approve the request for their membership change. So they could either be moved up to a group manager or other positions if there are other positions within that group. The final thing, like I mentioned, is accept expense. So once the group manager creates an expense or someone else's expense is approved and there's an expense that is created anywhere, the user who is included in that has the option to accept or reject that. So they receive the notification was created or approved by a group manager. That includes that current user, as I mentioned. It gives the user an option to accept and pay that expense or reject the expense with a mandatory message to be sent back to the group manager, giving information such as I shouldn't be included in this group or this expense, or I shouldn't, this expense amount is wrong or the date is wrong, something like that, to allow the group manager to update that. So from there, that's kind of the brief overview of how all these use cases fit in with the class diagram. One more thing about the class diagram is that the user group and expense classes, all the major classes, are all managed by the data management class, which has the ability to access the databases for all of the users, the payments, the groups, and expenses. The users will use this to run reports based on all this. The group will store the users and their expense information. The expenses will really only store the expenses and the users that is included, but this is just a safeguard. All right, moving on to the next one, sequence diagram. So this is a sequence of how an expense is to be created. So a user will initialize the home page. Once they get to the home page, they can log in as a user, and that will validate or verify that the user is logged in successfully, which will then send them to the expense GUI since they wanted to create an expense. So they create an expense, and there is no expense created right now, so it'll add an expense, and then it'll create officially the individual expense since this add expense was called. Once that create expense is called, a lot of stuff will be done at this point right here to adjust who's part of the expense, what group is part of it, all the information that is necessary with it as well. And so that will be saved to the data management, like I mentioned before, and that will store it in a database. And once that is saved, it will go back here and the expense class will send a notification back to the user that the expense has been created for all the users involved. So we move on to the sequence diagram number 2, and that is create user. So once again, we initialize the home page and we go to account management because you want to create an account. It checks the email in the user class, and if the email does not exist, it creates a new account, a new user. And so when that account is created, you'll be able to change the username, set the password, change the email, all of which have to occur. So once all those occur, then you can save the user, and once again, that is saved in the data management, and the user is then created and saved, and then it goes back to the home page, and they are logged in officially as a new user. So here's the state diagram of how the login works. All of these are functions of the home page or of the account management GUI and user. So from the beginning, they'll check the email once the email is entered by the user. If the email is false, they do not have an account. I can't go any further until they create an account. If their email is false and they do create an account, they do have an account. That's the state that they are in. Likewise, if you go from the beginning and you have an account because the email is checked and it exists, you have an account, but you're not logged in yet. So then you're entered to the login screen and you're currently logged out because you have not logged in. After that, you have the option to enter your password and such, which will log you in, and that is the end of the login, and you remain in the logged in state until you are done. The second state diagram is the expense. So in the creation of an expense, it'll always be pending. The group member or expense member creates an expense, but it is pending until the expense is approved. As I mentioned in the class diagram, all of the expenses needed to be approved by the group members that were part of that expense. So if that expense is approved by everyone, it is in the expense approved state, and then the member or the manager of that expense can go and publish that. And it is now published and users are able to pay. If it's approved, the manager of that expense can also go back and change the details, which will put it back in pending, which will need to be approved once again by the members of that expense. If the expense is rejected, once again, that manager of that expense will be able to change the details and go back to this expense pending. And if it's approved, it can go on. If not, it can go in this cycle for a while. It can go in this cycle for a while until everything is approved and no more details needed to be changed. Details can be changed, as you can see, in either the approved or rejected state, in case there's any mistake here they didn't realize, or in this case, there's something wrong that they do need to fix before approving it and publishing it for payments. And the final state diagram is the group. So the creation of the group starts by the create group. But once again, the group is unpublished and it's pending, similar to how we saw the pending in the previous slide. From there, you can either publish the group, and that would make it visible to everyone and invite all the necessary users, or in this pending, you can also delete the group. If you made a mistake, you can just delete it. It will be stored almost as an archive. So if you wanted to go back and recreate the group, you can also do that as well. Once again, if you go from pending, you can publish this group, but from there, you can also delete that group, similar to when it's in the pending, and go back and recreate that group if necessary, or it will just remain in the deleted group archived for later use if you need it. In any of these states, it can kind of just be put on hold and you can go back later on and publish or delete. Once it is published, or if it's unpublished, it will remain unpublished until it is published. And if it's deleted, it will remain deleted until the user has an option to recreate the group. All right, so that is the main overview of a few of the diagrams for the SplitSmart software. Lots of information, but it is very, very important to get all this information in just to see how the entire software will work together and how everything is managed in the data management. And so this will allow for a smooth process for the user of the software and fill all of the customer's requirements. And there are more diagrams in my whole project. These are just a few of the major ones that kind of give it the best overview of how the software works. All right, thank you very much for watching.